Morning, everybody. We missed you over the last 2 weeks, but it's good to be back in Washington. We certainly are all in good spirits, having come off of what we believe was a very successful issues conference where a record number of Democrats came together all across the spectrum that represents the gorgeous mosaic of the House Democratic Caucus to focus on our For the People agenda. And we've been very clear from the beginning. We understand that we were elected to fight for the people, not for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. That's what the other side does, as evidenced by the GOP tax scam. We wake up each and every day with one objective. We're going to fight for working families, middle-class folks, and senior citizens. We're going to fight at our best. Democrats fight for the people, Republicans that we know are important to the American people, with a focus on driving down the high cost of life-saving prescription drugs. Later on today, that we can reduce in order to live with the decency and the dignity that they deserve. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. No American should ever have to choose between putting food on the table, paying the rent or mortgage, or getting access to the life-saving later today for generic drugs at lower costs with the same medicinal addresses one of the anti-competitive practices, and we're going to move legislation designed to address so that the brand name drug can continue to be the only one on the market. It's an outrageous practice. Many Americans aren't aware of it, but they are aware of the fact that we pay more for life-saving prescription drugs here in America than any other developed country in the world, including the country immediately to our north, Canada. No basis for that makes any rational sense. So we're going to continue to advance our For the People agenda. And as you know, that involves lowering health care costs, that involves bringing our democracy to life. We've passed H.R. 1. That also involves infrastructure. So let me now yield to our distinguished vice chair from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, my good friend, Katherine Clark.
Thank you, Hakeem, and good to be with you all. Thank you for coming this morning. This week, in addition to tackling prescription drug costs, we are going to be advancing our bold infrastructure package. We know that infrastructure is the foundation of our economy. It is also one of the pillars of our For the People agenda, which is all about putting those needs of families at home back on the front burner here in Congress. It will be a huge source of jobs. As we can see, 16 million good paying jobs is our goal. And it will be a source of investment in our communities. It is our bridges, our roads, our transit systems, but it's also our homes and neighborhoods that are threatened by rising sea levels and coastal and inland flooding. We are prepared to be bold, to have an infrastructure package that will be a game changer for the American people. And that's why our vision goes beyond roads and bridges and includes broadband, water infrastructure, energy, schools, housing, and climate resiliency. I know when I was home, I met with 18 of my communities about resiliency and infrastructure and what they needed from this package. And they had so many ideas of what they wanted to do with public transit, how they wanted to build climate resiliency in their communities, how they wanted to encourage regionalization. We know that all of this is going to help us tackle our unmet infrastructure needs. And the package for the president, their meeting will start shortly at the White House. And that's what we're hoping to hear from the president today. What is his vision? Where does he see the revenue workers? Whether it's Buy America, supporting is bipartisan, is also our priority. We are confident that the majorities in both the House and the Senate are there, and we are willing to act on this vital economic initiative. We are looking forward to working across the aisle and to putting Americans and our workers into action. So with that, we will open it up for questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
What is the Democrats' response going to be to the pattern of stonewalling from the Trump administration on the litany of investigations you have going on?
Well, we will use every available legal means to make sure that the administration complies with our constitutional responsibility to conduct oversight on behalf of the American people.
What are those? What are you contemplating?
Well, Chairman Nadler, Chairman Cummings, Chairman Schiff have all elaborated to some degree. That will involve, when appropriate and necessary, the issuance of subpoenas. That may also involve the need to try to get those subpoenas enforced in the Article III federal court system.
Do you believe that a $15 federal minimum wage is appropriate for all congressional districts, including some of the more competitive freshman picked-up districts?
I personally have supported the $15 minimum wage. It's already in effect in the state of New York. I recognize that there are geographic differences that people need to consider, and the House Democratic Caucus is working.
I was wondering, do you see Trump rolling back the presidential power limitations that have been in place since
Out war at this moment on congressional fathers that he were they chose they are a separate and co-equal branch of government. We don't work for Donald Trump. We work for the American people.
If I can just underscore what the chairman just said, that it's really not a matter of precedent. This is a matter of the Constitution, and that we are a co-equal branch. And sometimes my colleagues across the aisle are not acting like we are a co-equal branch, but that is how our powers are laid out in the Constitution. That is our responsibility when we take the oath of office, and that is how we are going to proceed with this president.
Can you talk a little bit about what revenue stream you would consider for the infrastructure bill? It's going to cost a lot of money. Would Democrats endorse a gas tax, rolling back the corporate tax rates? Have you discussed amongst yourselves what would be acceptable?
Let me let Catherine respond, and then I'll respond.
Yeah, I think that we are looking at today, the purpose of the meeting is to hear what the president wants. And we're not going in with a list of demands.
Why not? You're in a majority. Why not go in with your own plan?
Because we really we think this issue is so critical to investment. And every single time the president has said, we can work together on this bill. So we want to go in with an open mind and say, we're here, let's work together. But everything that you just named, whether it's looking at the corporate tax structure, whether it's looking at gas tax, all these ideas of revenue are out there. We have many bills and proposals working their way through Ways and Means Committee and other committees looking at different proposals. But we're at the beginning of this process with the president. It's very much a priority that this be a bipartisan effort. So we're going to be looking to say, how do we fund this? How do we make these critical investments in our economy that we know will pay dividends back?
Given the fact that you're investigating the president pretty vigorously here on the House, do you believe that you'll be able to work together on a very legislative item, given the atmosphere, the very divisive atmosphere that's been created between the president and House Democrats?
That is going to be 100% up to the president. We've been working on 2 tracks since we took the majority, with our priority being the For the People agenda, which we have been working on and moving bills. The other person that we're not talking about in this equation is Mitch McConnell. And that we have the Violence Against Women Act, Net Neutrality, Paycheck Fairness Act, H.R. 1, all waiting at the Senate door for Mitch McConnell to let them in and let these solutions for American families have their day in the Senate.
Yeah, let me just simply respond to that, and then we'll go to you. But the Ways and Means Committee has already conducted an informational hearing on this issue, where we heard from a variety of people, including the head of the Chamber of Commerce, a Republican-leaning organization, and the AFL-CIO, which is more in the progressive camp. Both of them have indicated that they would be open to considering additional revenue sources. We want to hear from the President of the United States. He came to Congress, spoke during the State of the Union address, and said we should work on infrastructure in a bipartisan way. We agree. Now we want to hear his ideas as to how we can fund a 21st century infrastructure plan. Not a 1950s infrastructure plan, a 21st century infrastructure plan.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned going to court to enforce some of these subpoenas that the administration and the president is potentially trying to defy. Why not do more than that, like some of your members have suggested? Isn't there a concern that the president might be trying to run out the clock on the oversight you guys are doing by going to court? These things take a long time to work their way through that system and could go beyond the next 2 years. What about some of your members have suggested fines for people who ignore subpoenas, potentially jailing people? I mean, what is your sense of?
Well, the decision to go to court has not been made yet. It has been raised as a possibility by the respective chairs of jurisdiction. But we will make that decision only on a sober basis and follow the law as it's laid out. We actually believe in the concept of separate and co-equal branches of government. The Founding Fathers, in their brilliance, indicated that when there's a dispute between the Article I Congress and the Article II Executive Branch, the Article III Judiciary is supposed to work it out.
Mr. Jeffries, do you think with this campaign of massive resistance to congressional oversight, the president is trying to goad the House into impeaching him? And do you think that the House is going to have any other choice to do so if he continues to not respect the Article I powers of the House?
It's above my pay grade to get into the head of Donald Trump.
Speaking of which, you all have been talking about working with the president for over 2 years on infrastructure. Nothing has happened. Has anything fundamentally changed that would make a bipartisan deal more likely?
Democrats are now in the majority, and we have laid out a willingness to work in a bipartisan way with this president to fix our crumbling bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, sewage system, public housing developments in a way that we believe will create 16 million good-paying jobs. It will be good for the American people, good for commerce, good for the economy, and good for our country. We hope we have a willing partner in Donald Trump to get this done. Sorry.
So Democrats are poised to pass the Paris Climate Bill this week. What are the next legislative steps on climate, whether it be renewable clean energy mandate, something to that effect, or anything else? Right?
Well, under the tremendous leadership of Chairwoman Kathy Castor, the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis has been charged with evaluating the different options to proceed and then making recommendations to the caucus and to the Energy and Commerce Committee no later than March 31st of 2020.
Is that, do you expect more imminent or urgent action than that?
Well, this week we're focused on making sure that we pass, hopefully in a bipartisan way, H.R. 9 to deal with the urgency of the climate crisis that is before us. This is the beginning, not the middle or the end.
Yeah, and we just want to underscore that we are talking about the Paris Accord, but what we're really talking about are the U.S. standards. These aren't some international standards. These are standards the United States developed. And we're asking the president come up with a plan to meet our own standards that we put forward. And again, this is another place where we are trying to work in a bipartisan fashion, not only around infrastructure, which is the focus today with the White House, but also around prescription drugs, also around climate. We need this Congress to come together around these crucial issues facing families at home.
So you've talked about possibly going to court to force the Trump administration to comply. There are a couple of places where Trump has already gone to court. He's already sued Chairman Cummings, and his lawyers and his children have already sued to block banks from releasing his financial records. So what is your response to that? Are you guys going
The Trump lawsuits are baseless and they are likely to be dismissed in court. We're going to continue to proceed in a careful and deliberate fashion consistent with our constitutional responsibility to do oversight. We are not going to over-politicize. We're not going to over-investigate. We're not going to overreach. But we are not going to run away from our constitutional responsibility to serve as a check and balance on an out-of-control executive branch. That's not the Democratic caucus playbook. That's not the Nancy Pelosi playbook. That's the James Madison playbook.
But are you leaving it to Chairman Cummings to just respond to the suit against him and he's being sued, or Democrats gonna countersue or respond to the complaint?
Well, Chairman Cummings is in regular contact with Speaker Pelosi, as well as the entire leadership of the House Democratic Caucus and the caucus about the appropriate way to proceed, and we're going to proceed collectively. But you can be certain that we have Elijah Cummings's back.
Speaker Pelosi had originally said that you all would not be looking at impeachment, you would let the investigation speak for themselves. But with these new developments, is that something that's being discussed in leadership, how you all might proceed?
Well, we were away for 2 weeks. We just got back. We had a caucus meeting. We discussed infrastructure. We discussed prescription drugs. We discussed our response to the climate crisis. Not a moment of an hour meeting. The largest gathering of House Democrats in Washington, D.C. after a 2-week recess was spent on impeachment.
You just mentioned H.R. 9 came up at the caucus meeting this morning. What was the message that was sent to the caucus on H.R. 9, the need for the bill? What's the arguments we should expect to hear from the Democrats this week on the floor?
Well, I'm going to yield to Vice Chair Clark because I think she laid it out in a very eloquent way, but this is about what will the United States do from a standard perspective as it relates to confronting the existential climate crisis that exists in the world. This is a now issue. It's not a future issue. And we need some leadership from the President of the United States now. And that is part of the reason why we're moving forward with H.R. 9.
Yeah, and I think the discussion we're having at the White House today around infrastructure is so intertwined with what we are going to do to address climate, build resiliency in our communities. Climate change is the overarching issue on how we protect and grow our economy. There are things we need to do for our security to address climate, but it is also a great economic opportunity to be leaders in this country on the green revolution and to make sure that we are leading the way in renewables and battery storage and building a new electrical grid that can actually support and be secure for our electrical needs and how we move forward into the future. This is an investment in our future. And what we are hoping to hear from the president this morning is that he sees and has a vision for the future of this country and how we work on what the Department of Defense has identified as our #1 national security threat, which is climate change. So there is opportunity and there are security issues, and we hope that we can marry those in the infrastructure bill as we move forward also with specific H.R. 9 proposals. So it's a big day for making sure that the president understands the urgency and how interconnected these two issues are.
Right now, we're having this Medicare for All hearing. How does that fit into all of the healthcare priorities you're working on? You obviously are emphasizing the prescription drug work.
Well, House Democrats are united behind the principle that we need to drive down the high cost of life-saving prescription drugs because they are out of control. We are also united around the principle that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, every single American should have access to high-quality, affordable health care. That's a principle that unites us. We're working through how do we get from where we are to where we need to go. The one thing that is clear is that every single House Democrat supports the notion that we must strengthen the Affordable Care Act and protect people with pre-existing conditions.
And If I can just add, the one thing this president has been clear is he doesn't stand with the American people on that. You know, just a few weeks ago, he said he's joining the lawsuit to completely undo the ACA. We are coming up on May 4th on the anniversary of repealing the ACA, and we know how the American people were impacted by that decision by the Republicans. And the president keeps showing us where he is on this issue. And as House Democrats, we are saying we have to do better. We have to use the ACA as a platform to make sure that we are bringing quality, affordable health care that is accessible to every American. That is part of our promise. That was the issue in 2018. And we are working every day to make sure that we live up to our promises we made to the American people to keep this as a priority issue.
I have time for a few more questions. We'll go to the back and then we'll come back up front.
In addition to going to court, some members feel like that might take too much time. Some members have talked about contempt proceedings, potentially even using the inherent contempt, which I don't think has been used since like the 1930s. Do you think that that's an option that should be considered, and do you see the pros and cons of that versus going to court?
Well, I will defer to Chairman Nadler, Chairman Schiff, and Chairman Cummings on the best way to proceed. They are more than capable of helping to guide the ship forward, of course, with Nancy Pelosi as our captain.
Follow-up question on H.R. 9. That was a voluntary agreement already inked by Obama. What do you have to say to critics who say, A, it doesn't go far enough, and B, Democrats should be bringing something new in climate forward?
Well, the Paris Agreement is a substantial step in the right direction. It is a beginning point. It's not a middle point. It's not an end point. Under the leadership of Kathy Castor and the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, we expect that bold, new, and innovative ideas on addressing our climate crisis are going to be put forth in short order. Last question.
I imagine every once in a while you guys think about the political impacts of some of the legislation you pursue. If you get a bipartisan infrastructure bill with President Trump, is there any concern that you might help your own political prospects as a group, but that you also might help him get reelected?
No. Our job is to get things done for the people, period, full stop. That's what we were elected to do. To the extent that this atmospheric political concern has ever been raised, House Democrats answered that question last year when we agreed to work with the president on bipartisan criminal justice reform to strike a blow against the mass incarceration epidemic. The political chips will fall where they may. Our job is to get things done. And if we can reach a meaningful bipartisan infrastructure bill that helps fix our crumbling bridges, roads, tunnels, and mass transportation system, that is a win for the American people. Thank you. Oh, Catherine.
I just wanted to add that anytime we put the American people first and get to bipartisan solutions, that is only going to help us politically.
Thank you, everyone.